I'm Marianne Hudson with the Alabama Wildlife and Freshwater Fisheries Division, and I'm joined today by Thomas Harms. He is our large carnivore biologist, and we are going to talk about black bears in Alabama today. We're going to learn more about these wild neighbors and all sorts of things about their lifestyle, their habitat, and what to do if we see one. Welcome, Thomas. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Marianne.
Got a lot of questions for you about black bears. Now, black bears are the only species of bear that we have in Alabama, correct?
Correct.
All right, I have some questions for you about them. In general, how many black bears do you think we have in our state?
Our research has shown that we have approximately 350 to 500 black bears throughout the state.
And those bears are breeding and making more bears every year?
Correct. Those are breeding populations both in the extreme northeast and the southwest.
Okay, so they're all around the state potentially?
Correct.
Okay. Now, these bears, I know they're not endangered. I know that black bears are very plentiful in other places and becoming more plentiful in Alabama. But even though they're not endangered, they are protected. Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, they are considered a game species in Alabama. They're just a game species without an open season. Eventually, when the numbers get to a certain point and the resources become populated enough to where we can start a hunt, we will do so. And like I said, they're a game species, so all we do is open a season on them.
But for right now, no.
For right now, no hunting season. Hopefully, in the near future, that'll be a resource the state can have.
So you talked about there being black bears up north, down south, and around our state. What types of things are Alabama black bears eating?
They're mainly they're omnivorous, meaning they eat anything, but most of their diet consists of, research has shown for Alabama bears, it's 96% vegetation, which would your berries, your acorns, any kind of fruit bearing. They actually graze too, vegetation. Very small percentage of it is actually meat, and most of the meat that they actually eat is usually from either an animal that's been hit and killed or a hunter lost a deer or something. They'll come upon it, but that's where most of their meat actually comes from.
Now, I see by this specimen that they have some pretty formidable claws. What are they using these claws for?
They use those for climbing trees. Their claws are mainly for climbing trees, and they can tear off bark and stuff to get to insects, whether they eat termites or beetles and what have you underneath fallen trees or dead standing trees. They also use them to dig out their dens to sleep, and that's mainly what their claws are for.
Now, I can also see by this specimen that it looks pretty fierce. We have these wild neighbors all around the state. Do we need to be afraid of black bears?
You don't need to be afraid of them. You should not fear them, but you should respect them. They need to be respected. They're not dangerous, but they can be. You make sure they have their space. Do not try to approach them. If you do see one, you can take a picture of them, but you need to take the time to give them their space and let them know that you're there. You want to be vocal and just back away slowly. Do not run. Do not run with a black bear. Just back away slowly and let them know that you're there.
So just because they're large and powerful, it sounds like just like any other wild animal, they really just want to be left alone.
Correct. It's no different than if you're out west and you're dealing with elk or buffalo, in Yellowstone. You can walk up to those easily, but that doesn't mean you should. They're not a bear, but they can be aggressive and they can kill you. So you just give them respect and give them their space.
How big do they get?
The males average around 350 and the females around 250, but the males can get up to 500 or more, but usually around Alabama, they average around 350.
350 pounds?
Yes.
Now, can a big 350-pound bear still climb a tree?
It can. They can still climb a tree. They're very good in trees. You'd be amazed at the small limbs that they can climb on to get those acorns and fruit off the tree.
So is that why they're in the trees? They're looking for food? Or?
Mainly for food. Sometimes they do den up in trees if it's a big enough tree, but mainly they're up there for feeding or for cubs. That's their number one for protection. When they're young and they're vulnerable to predators, mainly coyotes and other animals like that, the first instinct is to tree. The closest tree they can get to, they'll run right up it and stay up until mama allows them to come down.
So even the cubs can climb?
Correct.
Wow. Now, these are our wild neighbors, and most of us are nosy neighbors. So I want to know more about the bear. What's a bear's life like? Let's start at the beginning of the year. Let's start in the winter, January, February. What's an Alabama bear doing?
January, it's a little bit different from north to south because the winters are a little harder up north. But during January, they're usually denned up and they're asleep. They're not in a true hibernation like you would think of in most movies and stuff. They on days if you have cold freezes, they'll go into a deep sleep, but not a true hibernation. And then as it warms up, the next day or two, they'll migrate out and look for food, and they'll come back in when it gets cold. And then the same way with February. In February, usually the pregnant sows or the females will have their young, and they'll stay in the den until March, April, and come April, the 1-year-old males and females usually are pushed out and from home, and the young females usually stay around their mom, and they take on a piece of the property. Their mom allows them to stay around home. The males are pushed off and they go long distances away, and that's usually when we get our first bulk of calls, is young juveniles being pushed out of the home, looking for somewhere to go, and they're kind of young and dumb, and they tend to go through people's backyards. Even in downtown cities, they just travel straight through. And then come June, July is the breeding season. You have big males looking for females, and then come August, September on, they're doing their best to get as fat as they can and eating acorns and whatever they can, until winter, when they'll start their home range shrinks, and they'll go back into sleep mode or time to den up.
Now, when they're in that sleep mode, and that you said it's not a true hibernation. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, how long are they resting? And they just kind of, are they waking up every day, or what are they doing?
It really depends on, because our winters are so we down in South Alabama, you might only have 6 freezes, if that, a year. And those days of cold, harsh weather, they'll sleep. Kind of like you do on a rainy day. You just stay inside and don't do anything. They'll do that, and then when it warms up, they'll go out and they might look for some food. And fatten up again, look for a snack, but they usually don't go too far away. Their home range shrinks, and they'll stay within a 1 square mile. They might only move 1 square mile during that period, and between until the next cold front comes through. Up north where you have longer periods of freeze, they'll stay in for maybe for a week or 2 or longer, depending on how cold it is, and they'll do the same thing. Once it warms up, they'll come out and look for some food and in a small area, and then go back.
Well, it sounds like the behavior of an Alabama black bear may be very different from their behavior in other states where it gets colder. Is that right?
Correct, and that's why, too, with I said there are 94 to 96% vegetation, is because there's a lot more. We have longer, warmer seasons than most states do, and shorter winters, so they don't need that. There's not that need for meat as much as. You go up north, to Canada and stuff like that, where they have long, hard winters, and when they're coming out, they're looking for some meat because they're trying to get some quick fat on them after spending so long denned up.
Now, tell me again when the cubs are born.
The cubs usually are born in February, and they don't really start moving around too much until about April, mid-April to May.
How many cubs does a female usually have?
On average, we're talking about 2 cubs, but they can have anywhere from 1 to 5. They've had 5 cubs, but usually that's extreme. But 2 to 3 is about average. 50-50 male-female ratio.
Now, when they're born, are they very small, or how much do they weigh?
Oh, when they're born, they can fit in the palm of your hand when they're first born, and they cannot see. They're very needed on their mother for that first month. They really can't do much of anything for that first month, and that's why they don't really start moving until late April, May, and it takes them even longer before they can start climbing. So they don't travel too far because she's not able to protect them too well. They'll start moving a little bit more as they're able. Once they're able to climb, then they can leave their denning area and move on to other places, because if predator comes, they are able to go right up the tree. But until that time, they don't really move too much.
Now, what kind of predator would go after a young black bear?
Especially when that little, we're talking about coyotes, pig problem. We have pig problem. The habitat that they use, especially to den, is a high usage area for pigs, and so pigs could be a huge problem on bear cubs that young, and I guess those would be your two main ones. Maybe bobcats, any kind of larger predator like that would be one.
Now, you mentioned the wild pigs, and you talked a little bit about what the black bears eat. Sounds like they both kind of eat the same types of things.
They do. That's another issue too with competition there. The only difference in their diet really is pigs do eat tuberous roots. They'll dig up roots and stuff. Bears usually don't do that. But yeah, well, pigs eat anything, so they're kind of in competition with everything. But yeah, directly to the bear they are, because their habitat that they use is basically the same area.
So you mentioned again about what they eat, and I'm looking at these big teeth, but despite the fact that they're so powerful and they have such strong mouths and sharp teeth, they're mostly eating vegetation and bugs and things like that?
Yeah, in reality, that with the like I said, they're not real good predators. They will usually, if they chase down prey. Usually they might eat a snake, or rabbits tend not to move too. They wait until the last minute to run. They might be able to jump on a rabbit, or a fawn. Fawns tend not to run. When they're first born, they tend to stay. If they happen, and it's usually happen pawn. They don't go out looking for this. If they happen upon it, then they're able to use it. But they don't run. They run fast, but they're not going to outrun a grown deer. Once a fawn gets to a certain age, they're not going to be able to outrun that fawn to catch that fawn. Same thing with a rabbit. If they don't catch it right away, they're not going to be able to keep up with a rabbit. So they're not real good predators when it comes to that. And these teeth are mainly used for protection from other bears.
Okay.
Especially young juvenile males, passing through with, you have competing males with each other, competing over females, and their home range areas. So this mostly has to do with defense against other bears.
So do they fight?
Like most animals in the wild, they prefer not to fight. If you get injured in the wild, you can't there's not a hospital you can just hop in and say, hey, I broke my paw, can you fix it, or I chipped my tooth. So if you get hurt, a broken tooth can turn into a cavity that can end up turning into where you can't eat, and then you slowly starve to death. So they don't want to fight. So most of it's all bluff. Same thing when it comes to you. If they see you, most of it's if they get defensive, it's mainly all bluff, because they don't really want to get into a fight, because it could end up be death in the long term. But they do occasionally get in a fight. Some of the bigger males you'll see when they're toward the end of their life, that they'll get into a little more fighting, and they can get injured. We'll get some that has missing parts of their ear or a cut lip into, but it's not overly dramatic. It's very short, and take a few swipes, and okay, you're the winner. I'll back off.
They decide who's the boss.
That's right.
So they have all these tools for their social interactions, not just for gathering food.
Correct.
Interesting. Now, let's pretend that I am walking in the woods, and all of a sudden I come around the corner in the trail, turn on the trail, and there's a black bear right by a bush 10 feet away from me. Tell me what I should do.
The first thing you need to do is, of course, stop running. Don't get any closer. Be vocal,
Okay.
Be loud. It doesn't matter what you say to them, just be loud and let them know that you're there, and then slowly back away and give them their space. Sometimes the bear, more likely every time, the bear is going to run off. Once they see you and know that you're there, they're going to run off. If they do turn, they might turn and as a defense, and they might give a bluff snort, or they pop their jaws. They make a loud popping noise with their jaws. And don't worry, that's them telling you to give them their space. You know, you made them nervous and they want their space, and you just keep backing off. In the rare cases, which we haven't had in Alabama, but in the rare cases, it could turn into predatory mode. You know, more likely you have a better chance of getting hit by lightning. But you know, just for everybody to know, there are chances it could become predatory, where it went from a defense to a predatory mode. If that happens, they'll give you signs to let you know whether it's defense or predatory. If it becomes predatory, their heads usually drop. They'll start slobbering a lot because that's how they pick up scent, and their ears are pinned back.
Okay.
And their head will start swaying. If they start doing that, and that's usually a predatory mode. Your first instinct is to run.
Mm-hmm.
That's everybody's first instinct, to run, and it's hard to tell somebody not to run, but do not run, because if you run, even if it's a defense, they're in a defense mode. If you run, that could trigger their predatory mode.
Okay.
When you run, you're telling them, "Hey,
chase me.
You're prey."
Mm-hmm.
And because when he goes into predatory mode, the first thing he's doing, he's looking at you and trying to decide, do I have the ability to take you and not get hurt?
Mm-hmm.
And when you run, you just told them,
I'm vulnerable. Come get me.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you want to stand your ground, get big, and make noises. If you have the ability to pick up a stick or something handy, go ahead and pick it up. They may do a bluff charge. I know your first instinct is to run, but when they do a bluff charge, stand your ground, and they'll run at you, and then they'll back off. They see if you're going to run, see if you're fearful of them, see if they can take you. They're basically sizing you up, and then just slowly just keep giving them space as you can, but just never run until you're able to get to a safe location.
So remove yourself from the situation.
Try to move yourself
and make sure you don't have them cornered as well, I assume.
And that's the other thing, is you want to make sure that you're giving them space, but you're also wanting to give them a way of able to leave. You want them to have a place to get away. They might feel like they're kind of backed into a corner. So when you're giving them space, it's not just to get yourself away from them. It's also to give them a way to retreat themselves.
Right. Now, these bears, despite everything we just discussed, this has never happened in Alabama.
This
Despite
hasn't.
the fact that we have hundreds of bears, it's not a big problem.
And when I say that in case there's ever a situation, but that's a rarity that ever happens, and especially deep in the South, where they're not really a meat eater. They don't eat as much meat, and they're not as predatory down here as in the same way to Canada. But even in Canada or somewhere where they are, it's a very rare situation.
Okay, so I don't have a lot to worry about personally from these bears. We're living with them as wild neighbors, just as we always have here in Alabama. But what if I just don't want them in my yard? What if they're eating my trash? And what can I do to discourage them from settling on my property?
Well, I like to, when people ask about bears and stuff, I like to compare them to raccoons.
Okay.
What they eat, the way they act, everything about them is basically the same thing as a raccoon. The only thing is they're a lot bigger, and they are considered carnivores. And so anything that brings a raccoon to your backyard is going to bring a bear to your backyard. Whether it be if you have a trash can, deer feeders are my #1 calls. Usually when a bear is coming, either coming because there's a deer feeder in the backyard, or they're getting to the trash cans, or dog food, or there's a lot of people nowadays with they'll have a handful of chickens. The small town farmers, they're just raising enough chickens for eggs for the house. They'll get into the chicken food, or if you have bees. So mainly, you want to get rid of those things. If it's chicken feed, you want to make sure it's put into a container that the bears can't get to it. Same thing with trash cans. You want to only put it out by the road when it's ready to go. With bees, you can use the couple things you can use is electric wire. All things hate electricity. There's also You can use dogs. Guard dogs are really good for that. German Shepherds, any kind of guard dog. You don't want a dog that chases the bear because then you're causing another issue. But those are two good ways. Either you need to get rid of the attractant, or if it's something like I said, chicken food you can't get rid of, put in a container that a bear can't get into, or use electricity or a dog to protect it. Dog food or cat food, but just make sure you feed them just enough to, that they don't leave any left. There's none left there for the bear to get to.
So these bears belong in Alabama, they're here to stay, and we need to do our part to make sure that we don't have any type of negative interactions with them.
Correct.
Make sure that we're not leaving a mess that's going to attract the bears.
Yeah, this is a new thing to us. They've always been in Alabama in certain places, but for the most part, a lot of us, this is a new thing, and it's kind of scary to a lot of folks. But there's many states that they've had them, have always had them, and it's no different than living with a possum or a raccoon in the back or anything else. A squirrel. They're used to it. You just got to learn how to do the things you need to do to make sure that they don't come to your house.
Now, speaking of learning, tell me about the types of research that you have done on these bears. I know you've had your hands on a lot of black bears in Alabama. Tell me about the things that you're studying and what you've learned.
Yeah, well, we're wanting to learn as much as we can about our species. We learned that we have two different subspecies within the state. We have the ones that are in the northeast are different than the ones in the southeast. Your northeast is your eastern black bear. The southwest is your Florida subspecies. We've also learned about their home range. They're somewhat the same. The ones in the up north have a little bit larger home range. Probably has to do with topography with the mountains, but we're talking about for males. We're talking about 20 to 30 square miles. For female, 10 to 15 square miles. We're also learned there was a little bit of a worry about the genetic issues with the island of bears and the Mobile, Tennessee Delta area. They do have their genetic. They haven't dispersed much. There hasn't been any genetic flow too much to them, but that is starting to break because we're having some more Florida bears coming through. That's helping the DNA, the genetic issue there. Also, we're learning. We're starting to work on a den monitoring with females, trying to find out a survival rate of cubs and dispersal of cubs, where they're going and how far they're going, and that sort of thing. And this is all to do with to make sure that we create a good management plan eventually for our resource, so we best manage the resource for the state of Alabama, for our public, and for use for where the viewing, for hunting, or whatever. But that's what we've been working on right now.
Now, I know when you trap and study these bears, you get a lot of information. You weigh them, and you try to figure out how old they are, and you put tags in their ears and radio collars on them. What type of information do you get from that?
With the radio collar, we that tells us where all they're going. We're able to, for sows, it's important because we can find out where they're denning at, and when it comes time for them to drop their cubs, we're able to go in and find their cubs, and we ear tag all the adults. The cubs we don't ear tag because they'll play with the tags and so they can rip them out. But we'll put a we'll call it pit tag, which is under the skin. We'll mark them that way, and so we're able to tell where they came from. And but yeah, we weigh them, we measure them, and get the information, and we check their health, and also aging. We age them. You're able to take one of their teeth and we send that in, and it can tell you their age of each animal. We can see how long they're living in the wild, and what ages they're reproducing, and how well they're reproducing at the age, and that also has to do with social dynamics, age. You can find information about using social dynamics with age, and that's a lot of the stuff that we're collecting right now.
Now, if someone sees a bear here in Alabama, do you want to know about it?
We do. We like to know about it. We know where A lot of them are, but you know they're moving. So we always like to know if we get new. You know, every once in a while we'll get new calls on where some new bears are. But any information is good information for us. We can collect and put in our database, and they can either email me or call me or I think you said maybe Facebook.
That's right. And what about tracks and scat? You want to know about those as well?
Yeah, tracks and scat's great. Pictures. I love.
Okay.
Everybody likes pictures. I'm the same way. I like pictures. If you can take a picture, even of scat or track, that's great. And any information you can give on it is good.
And what about game cameras? Do they turn up some bear pictures sometimes?
Those are, we get, most of our pictures come from camera pictures. That and, like I said, those juvenile males that are passing through somebody's backyard and are seen on the interstate or whatever, we get those too. But.
All right, well, great. Well, Thomas, we've learned a lot about black bears today. I know we're going to continue to learn more, and you can do your part to help us learn more about Alabama's black bears by reporting your sightings. Send any photos or reports of tracks, any scat or sign, game camera photos. You can email those to Thomas directly. His email address is thomas.harms, Harms, @dcnr.alabama.gov. You can also reach us on our Facebook page, Alabama Wildlife and Freshwater Fisheries Division, or through our website, outdooralabama.com. Keep looking for those bears and continue to enjoy Alabama's wildlife.